Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish Prism. Brought to you by Barhead.
Well, folks, welcome back to Through a Scottish Prism. Lovely to have you back. Been a week since we had our last wee chat. Nice. Hope you and yours are well. And you had a good Platinum Jubilee week, etc. Lots to discuss this week. And to help me do that, I have, of course, our resident Phil Boswell, who's in Myanmar. That's Burma for the rest of you. And joining us from Burma today is Phil Boswell. And I have got Sarah Sailors joining us from the Kingdom of Fife. Well, I presume the Kingdom of Fife.
Yeah.
Sarah, Phil, welcome. How are you, my friends?
Great, thanks. Lovely to be here.
Good. Well, we've got quite a few things to get through, but I think the lion's share of what we've got to talk about, this has obviously got to have been the declaration this week by the leader of the Scottish National Party and First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, who announced that with or without a Section 30, we will be having a referendum, which has, of course, brought out the usual suspects. It seemed it was deja vu as opposed to deja vu with the Better Together campaign. The old favourites were rolled out. But Sarah, did you get as excited as you were in 2011 when they announced it?
I don't think anybody, if we're honest, is as excited as we were, back then, because we've been through what we've been through, and we've seen what the British establishment is willing to do to prevent Scotland from getting self-determination. And at the same time, people are, well, I said, the thing on Twitter, when people, Twitter, when people are needing to choose between heating and eating, they're not going to get as excited about the notion of independence. There's a lot of people that we spent our whole lives wanting to get Scottish independence, but you're looking at a very, very different Scotland from the one that had a referendum in 2014. So, I think we've got to think really hard about what this campaign means. And if there's one good thing about it, silver linings, I'm always looking for silver linings, but there's one good thing about it is that it's very clear to people that Scotland has got to look at what its position is in international law. It's got to look at what its own constitution says, and it's not about going cap in hand to Westminster. We did that the last time. We saw what happened. This is the point at which we're going to have to grow a pair.
I agree.
And actually say, if we say that the Scottish people are sovereign, and we know what the will of the Scottish people has been and is, and also not just that, these are our elected representatives. Scotland is suffering. They might call it a squeeze, but we all know that it's an absolute crisis. We're in the worst emergency that any of us have seen in our lifetimes. And in an emergency situation, a government that, Scotland's ancient constitution has the sole purpose of government as being the common good, the welfare, the interests of the people. And if the government will not say, no matter what, we are doing this because we have to save our people, then, what do we have them for? So with a bit of luck, this campaign will kind of give a bit of backbone to the political leaders, and also, raise a mass movement where people are saying, this is what we need you to do. So.
Well, last time, Phil, the Yes group overtook the politicians. Let's hope that the ordinary grassroots does the same. And they now got a date as well, because the day after Nicola's announcement, Angus Robertson was in Good Morning Scotland, and he announced to the world that it would be October of next year. And we've had Patrick Harvey, I think it was Patrick Harvey, saying no ifs, no buts, it will go ahead with or without a Section 30. So there can be no backing down this time. There can't be, marching us back down the hill. Well, not without huge consequences.
Yeah, I can't, no matter how hard I try, because of what I've seen, heard, witnessed, been involved in, I'm finding it hard not to be skeptical. And as the song says, I believe half of what hear and none,
None of what you
or
see.
none of what you hear and half of what you see, you know. And I'll believe it when I see it. And as we've already raised our concerns in relation to going off half-cocked on something as vital as this for the future of our people and our country, then, you know, we're moving now with a fraction of the impetus and preparedness of 2014. You know, back then we did a big Scottish march in America with Alex there, snipers from every rooftop having a go at us to try and take us down. I don't even see the same level of animosity because I don't think the Union fears as much as they did, certainly near the closer to the end. But they were really putting the boot in from day one. With the Commonwealth Games in 2014 as well, Scotland was buzzing. We had a yes group that was organised. We had unification. We were all operating together, and it was taken out of the hands of the politicians. Now I know we all know that SNP provided the muscle and put the predominant shoulder to the wheel, and we were all part of that, or most of us were part of that. But this time, with the split in across parties, not just across parties, but within the SNP, SNP's lost a lot of that muscle, a lot of that strength, and I don't see anything like the Yes movement in charge. It's 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 fractured. We are split into different groups. We've been infiltrated. The SNP have been infiltrated, and the real uniform approach that we had previously is gone. Plus, here's the bottom line: we don't have a brilliant strategist behind it because you know we had things figured out. We played our cards close to our chest, and we trusted. I trusted in our leadership to guide us, and it was from a distance. They were pulling strings, but you had Blair Jenkins and the Yes Movement were phenomenal. That was a wonderful initiative, absolutely brilliant. I see nothing of this. I don't see anything, and I'm really trying not to be negative, but then you've got to think, well, what about the franchise? Are we wandering into the same situation with the franchise? You know, what all the talk of a plebiscite? I fear for a botched job on this. And that here's the thing: my cynicism takes me to my realpolitik is is it a deliberately botched job or otherwise? And if it fails to land in 2013, what of the Scottish Government and SNP's credibility? Because if there is already some other reason that it's not going to happen in 2013, how does that make us look? But my biggest fear is unification and lack of preparedness and lack of a plan. I could see the signs of it in 2011, 2012. We were doing an awful lot of work in preparedness for this, the white paper, all of the stuff that we did, the Edinburgh Agreement. I see nothing to tell me to have any faith that we're even approaching it half as competently as we did the last time. That's my worry.
Yeah, Sarah, I don't know if you know, you have to unmute yourself, Sarah. You've become muted. But I was going to say to you, when I said there that they've said, you know, no ifs, no buts, we're going ahead, and Angus has said 2023, we're going for it. I've seen some of the cynics, and there's no bigger cynic, as you know, than me, Sarah, and I have to be agreeing. In the same day, Nicola Sturgeon is pitching for the 2023 UK Eurovision Song Contest to be brought to Glasgow. Now, as I say, call me a cynic if you like, but why would you want Glasgow bedecked in Union bloody Jacks in the same year, the same summer, as you're trying to have an independence referendum? Is it a lack of strategy, a lack of thinking, or is Phil worried about, yeah, don't worry, we're not going to win it anyway. We're out to lose this. I mean, which is it? Stupidity.
Well, we're not going to know, until the fat lady sings. You know, all of this is kind of in the mix. But I suspect that there's a great deal of one hand not knowing what the other hand is doing, and sort of careering along without kind of looking at this as a whole political system. What's going to happen? So that's off here, over there with the GRA, and let's have the Eurovision, and let's have the referendum, and it seems to me like a scattergun effect. I think it's clear that the SNP realizes they can't keep putting it off and putting it off. We are in a crisis. There is a kind of sea change going on, and there's also quite a lot of grassroots movements coming up now, going, well, if they won't do it, we will. So there may be an element of we could lose control of the movement here. We could lose our influence and position here. But we won't know. It's speculation, and history will tell us. But I think everything Phil has said is, anybody with a critical mind is already, feeling the same. We've watched this, and we're also looking at the reality on the ground for people, and how do you galvanize people? And I'm hoping that what we can do is this: we will have to campaign, because but there's so many things we have to campaign on, because we can't afford to miss the opportunity if it's going to be there. But there's several things we need to be very clear about. And the most important is that we need to be looking at what kind of independence. If we were to break up the union tomorrow and Holyrood was our parliament, and we've lived inside an English constitutional political system for hundreds of years. We've had it grafted on, and look at it. Look at what we mean by accountability. Look at what's going on. We're going to be talking about some of these things later on. I know that, but you look at what the government is allowed to do, because it can do whatever it wants, and you really need to put that in context. I know people think history is, that's a done deal, but it was only 60 years ago that the British Empire began to break up. And the British Empire at one point controlled a quarter of the world's landmass and population. There was nobody to stand up to it. And so basically, they gave the world democracy, right? Let's have a look at that democracy, shall we? Lots of slaughter going on of people that wanted out, in Malaya and in Kenya were in the 60s. So it's not that long ago that they were just stringing people up and making the laws to make that okay. So we've got a parliament which is basically based, on English history, an English political system, makes up the law as it goes along. There's absolutely no accountability. People have no direct route to hold their feet to the fire or to sanction what they're doing. There's no impeachment. They have parliamentary privilege. Now that people can see Boris Johnson lying from the dispatch box, they know what parliamentary privilege actually means. And if we were independent tomorrow, we'd have pretty much that system, because Holyrood's not any more accountable to us than Westminster. And what would change? Really, what would change?
Well, this might not sit comfortably with some of our viewers, but Holyrood is just merely a branch office of Westminster. That's a fact. Westminster, what it giveth with one hand, it can take away with the other. Yeah. And so it's no surprise that it is the exact same as Westminster. But we should be pushing against that from day one. We should be pushing against that and making it completely different.
So we don't want to end up with an independent Scotland that is a little mini England with Correct. The same political problems.
Correct.
So what has to happen? And I was thrilled when Alex Salmond came out and said, this campaign can't go on in a vacuum. It has to have context. And we're needing to assert the claim of right. We're needing to assert the constitutional provisions in the claim of right.
I love the way you did that there, Sarah. The way you get that claim of right. Absolutely.
I'm going to do that.
It'll happen again.
That's why you're here.
Of course. But that's what change is about. It's about saying we have a different. If we didn't have something that was intrinsically different about Scotland, which meant an intrinsically different political system, why would we be so passionate to get our independence? It's because we know we're different. We never did things that way. And it's not time to have, our government will be just like their government, but it will be on its own and it won't have to deal with Westminster. No, we want independence because we want to be able to do things the way that the Scots do things. You know, and we have got the most amazing constitutional principles in Scotland, and they buried them because, you know, for a reason. They're terrifying. You know, you're going to be answerable to people. You're not going to have unaccountable power. Oh my God, how terrifying is that? You know, but we're not going to be able to galvanize people. We're not going to be able to push through the British establishment's blockade for keeping Scotland in place unless we all actually grow a pair and say, hold on a minute. We have international law on our side. We have international treaty law, and it's about damn time our lawyers started to, and judiciary started to learn something about international treaty law. Guess what? I've got news for you guys. It's not what you make up as you go along because you were the British Empire.
But if I could be devil's advocate for a minute, Sarah, I would just say this: the Chagos Islands. International law says that Britain and America shouldn't be there. They have ruled, get out. They're not doing it.
All right.
That's the problem.
So in our case, you know, they're not. They might, I suppose, but it's as much for. If Scotland, for instance, declared UDI, and it declared it under our constitutional provisions, under international treaty, and given that popular sovereignty, despite the fact that, by the way, Westminster has brought in 2 bills that put an end to that, but popular sovereignty in Scotland is, you know, it's acknowledged by Westminster, it's acknowledged internationally. If we did that, and if we went through the correct route, if we went through the OHCHR provisions, and the Scottish Government could do this, go to the International Court of Justice, we could already have approval to say that the result of that referendum, if we were to get a yes vote, you know, fix the voting system, stop the propaganda, we were to get a yes vote, having got that ruling from the International Court, it would already be we would already be recognized. The result would be already recognized. So it's about using it where we can use it.
But you need political will for that. That's the thing. We need political will. It's Phil, on this, and I want to come on to exactly what Sarah's talking about there. I wasn't planning to do it so quickly, but we'll go on to it in a second. I've got a link question and everything. But one of the things I saw is, you know, there's been a bit of a unionist backlash, and I saw a great tweet, and I'm going to use a dotty word for it. And I saw it, and someone said, in 2014, they said, if you vote yes, everything will go to shit. That was the unionists were saying. In 2022, they're saying, everything's gone to shit, vote no again. And it's that kind of stupidity we're up against. But on all this, to get out, to get wherever we're going, Nicola Sturgeon also said that she was going to make a statement on her roots to independence, because she did say to us, Phil, she admitted what we've all been trying to say now for about 6 or 7 years. You're never going to get a second referendum. You're not going to get a Section 30. London, and no, it's the only way, it's the only way. She admitted herself almost that it's not going to happen. But for some reason, why she couldn't tell us in the day, I don't know. I'd love someone to tell me. But by July the 2nd, she's going to give us alternative routes to independence. Now, it could be through our claim of right. It could be through dissolving the Treaty of Union. We don't know what her alternative route is. It could be, I hope, a plebiscite. But why do we have to wait another week to hear? Surely the plans are in place. Surely if you've announced no ifs, no buts, we're going ahead, it's going to happen. And if they stop us, this is, she should have said, and if they try and say no, this is what we're going to do. Why didn't she? Or have I missed something?
Yeah, I'm not overly concerned because it's not that far away, and these are complex issues. What I'm more concerned, and before moving on to this one, we should say that I'm in. You know, if we're going to do this, we're all in. All of these activists that have left SNP, we want independence. That, you know, there's a lot of my colleagues who have left the SNP. The reason they did it is because they just felt we weren't heading in the right direction, and they're pushing it. And part of the reason that we're having this, whatever it's going to be in 2013, failed success or otherwise, and I'm talking about just the event, much of it has got to be down to the creation of ALBA and ISP and all these other parties that left and tried to get a bit of friction on the initiative towards indie. So, you know, I'm in. I as much as I'm cynical and as much as I'm not happy about what failed, I just don't see leadership. I don't see real leadership in this respect, and I pray and I will help and I will forgive and I will do everything I possibly can to enable us to win. And I don't care about legacies. I don't care who gets the glory or the, just as long as we get a win. So I'm in, and I think we're all in. So please don't take it. Don't misunderstand. I'm not. I don't want to see failure. There will be no pleasure. It'll be an unmitigated disaster if we lose, and if we have a go and we lose. But we really have to give it the best shot. And the biggest concern is we're not doing that. So back on to what you were saying. The week doesn't bother me so much. What alternatives are we going to get? The big concern again is just to back what we initially said, and Sarah set out quite clearly. Well, how are we going to do that in 2023? How are you going to have a plebiscite in 2023? I mean, well, you're not. This is why we go back to the concern we had about clarification about what we're doing. When we had the Edinburgh Agreement, when we had an understanding, we had a basic roadmap towards a shot at the grand prize. Here, it's all very vague. Here, it's non-specific. Now, there is the excuse, and it's a legitimate one, that you shouldn't show your hand prior to playing it. But you should know at least roughly what the roadmap is. Now, if we're going to have the word referendum, what kind of referendum? What kind of franchise? And if there's going to be alternatives, what do you mean alternatives to different types of referendum or referenda? Or are we talking about completely different routes with different timelines and roadmaps?
Well, I mean, some people are hinting that they may slip in Devo Max, whatever that may mean.
No, if that comes in, then we tear the whole place down.
Well,
tear the whole place down.
That might be the price that Boris demands to hold
a
referendum.
And
that would muddy the waters. It would be a mess. It would be. I mean, because we know that it's how long's a piece of string when you talk Devo Max. I mean, one man's Devo Max is another man's independence. It's just a nonsense.
This is heading for serious trouble. If that happens, there will be serious trouble.
Yeah,
very serious trouble.
I couldn't support not now. Not now. I mean, to go back to Phil's point, Sarah, he's right. There cannot be a plebiscite in 2023. Now, that is my preferred option. I've made that clear to everyone. I believe, however we do it, a plebiscite is the way to do it. You have to get the approval of the sovereign people of Scotland. And whether we do that by plebiscite or referendum, I personally am in favour of a plebiscite. However, I also have to state, as I'm sure you want to, like Phil, I'm all in. Whatever happens, I'm all in. And I've made that clear. I'll back anything and everything to get us into independence. But if we get a plebiscite in 20, the point I was trying to make with Phil is when she had made that announcement and said no ifs, no buts, and we will legally or otherwise have a referendum, I would have then gone and said, and here's what happens, Boris, because if you don't, in 2024 and every subsequent UK general election and every subsequent Holyrood election, we will be having an independence plebiscite. We'll be standing on one thing only. So you can either cooperate with us now or face the music in 2024. And we do that by using our claim of right to have the governance that we so desire. Now, why she didn't say that, I don't accept what you say there, Phil, about Phil said there rather about, you have to keep your cards close. Yes, to a lesser degree, but she could have said that and let the Tories know this is one right across your bows, lads. We've got a claim of right. You don't want to do a referendum? Fair dues. We're going to use a plebiscite then. Am I wrong to think that could have been done?
Oh no, that could have been. I'll tell you what. More than that, what I would like to hear her say is, you need to be aware, Mr. Johnson, that we are answerable to you under the Scotland Act. We are the Scottish executive arm of Westminster. But you, under the treaty that you signed, and which, anybody who knows about treaty law will recognise for what it is, are answerable to the people of Scotland. The people of Scotland are sovereign over you. And that means that since we're answerable to you, they're sovereign over us. So it's not possible for us to have an illegal referendum in Scotland because we're answerable to the people, both for their, to their sovereign will and to the common good in Scotland. And that is simply how it is legally. So let's stop talking about an illegal referendum. Who makes the law that says this is illegal? I can tell you an international court would say they're doing the same thing with the law in their own United Kingdom, the international treaty, as they've been doing with other international treaties, which we'll get to later. But you don't get to do that, Mr. Johnson. You don't get to say we're sovereign and we'll decide what the law is. You're bound by international conventions, treaties you've signed, charters you've signed up to. So Scotland, if the Scottish executive government says we're answerable to the people of Scotland because you're answerable to the people of Scotland, therefore a referendum cannot be illegal. That's firing the salvo. I would like her to have said that. We can't have an illegal referendum in Scotland.
Well, you can't have it in the UK because one thing, let's just use using English law, which relies very much on precedent. In the UK, there is no such thing as a legal or illegal referendum. They are all advisory. That's just a fact. I'm old enough to remember, I'm sure a lot of our viewers will be too, old enough to remember that is. Strathclyde Regional Council had a referendum on, fluoride in the water.
Yeah.
So why shouldn't, there's no such thing as illegal. The Brexit referendum was advisory. The government could have chosen to ignore that. The British government could have chosen to ignore that, but they didn't. So your point is valid. But even more so with us is you're right, because we back it up with a claim of right, which they've sanctioned in their parliament as well as ours. So there is no such thing as an illegal. And I condemned, I condemned Nicola for using the word illegal in the first place. It should not have been put because it's given the unionists something to grab onto.
There's a very interesting twist to that, though, because Ian Blackford stood up and talked about popular sovereignty from the floor of the House of Commons, and he quoted Lord Cooper, 1953. Now, bear in mind they keep coming back to the 1988 convention. That claim of right, which didn't have any legal force. Cooper's 35 years before that. He's referring to a much older document. He's referring to something that was law in Scotland by statute, as well as built in, through all our constitutional documents. What that means is, here's a really interesting, boy, do we need some lawyers on board. Here is a really interesting implication. If the people in Scotland are sovereign, and they all accept that, if there's a referendum, how can it be consultative in Scotland? Because we are the sovereign power. So if we express our will through a referendum, doesn't that become binding on a government since they are subordinate to the people? And therefore, there's some very interesting challenges to be made to, for instance, the Brexit referendum, and actually to, in international law, the way that the independence referendum was conducted, it broke all the rules. There was a purdah period under the Edinburgh Agreement where you weren't supposed to bring any new policies in within the last 2 weeks of campaigning. And guess when they announced the vow and promised Devo Max and the moon and the earth and the stars and the sun if we would all vote no, right? That was a breach of an agreement that was one of the terms of the referendum. The reason that wasn't a judicial review because it was advisory. So there's no contract. When you have an election, a general election, there's a contract between the voters and the government that is voted into power. So that's when fraud can take place. But if it's an advisory, there's no fraud. It's consultative. The government can ignore it if it wants to.
And it did.
So you don't get. So here's a lovely opportunity. You can do whatever the heck you want in a consultative referendum. There's no fraud because it's only consultative. So you don't get a judicial review. It doesn't matter how many international observers say this is ridiculous. This isn't this was just dead easy to cheat and you broke the rules. There's nothing you can do about it because there's been no fraud. So they've got it every way. But I think if we, if our government is going to start, if our Scottish executive is going to start standing up and saying, well, we're going to do this anyway, it's about time they started pointing out, if you acknowledge the principle of popular sovereignty, guys, you can't have a consultative referendum in Scotland because the result is binding, which means the vote on Brexit was binding too.
Well, hopefully that's the legal advice that Nicola Sturgeon's received. We shall find out within the next 12 days or something, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And we seem to have lost Phil there in Burma somewhere. He's up the old Rangoon. So we're just going to have to soldier on without him, Sarah. I'm sure he'll come back. Well, I hope he does. Oh, talk of the devil.
Yeah. There was there was a power cut and I hadn't the UPS wasn't on, and it's just my mistake. But it's okay now, so sorted. Such is life.
So we were just talking about you. As soon as you left the room, Sarah and I stopped talking about
I'm really worried.
Started talking about you.
You're right.
No, we were just talking about all referendums in the UK are advisory. There's no such thing as legal.
Yes,
Legal,
yeah.
and I personally, as I said, it was regrettable that Nicola allowed the unionists that to something to grab onto, which they all have. Douglas Ross was first off the blocks with he wasn't taking part in a wildcat, and Fraser Nail, they've all joined in this. Stop feeding them bloody lines. Don't make it easy for them. Do you support a plebiscite as well? I believe, Phil.
Oh yeah, I mean the plebiscite for sure. What has to change is the franchise. That's crystal clear, and why we're using a local election franchise for decisions on our future, our country's future. That I mean, in local elections, visitors, students, people passing through, everybody can pitch in. And these are rules, and I know there's been a lot of talk about this and the blood and soil nationalism charge that's set against those of us.
Tell me about
who see, but it's these are the rules. This is how it works all over the world in civilized democratic countries where these issues need resolved. And by God, do these issues need resolved? Do we have to sort this out? Yes, we do. So why we continue to take the crumbs from the table of an oppressive regime that is living in the past. I mean, I'm here in what was Burma and Myanmar, and can't say too much, but this was the Brits certainly did their thing when they were here in Malaya and India, where I've been hanging about recently, and the local people are not happy about such things, about foreign powers running the show, and I know there's an issue in Britain, and there's some of us who are. I suppose jingoistic to that old British John Bull nonsense in my view, but we're respectful in our country. It is a debate, and they're making a lot of out of the split of the families. We have disagreements. That's what civilized people do. You have to have these conversations. You have to. Freedom of speech is critical in our civilization. It's what's created it, and we have to be able to voice our opinions, even if it causes offence. Person A's offence is not more important than person B's offence. And if my beliefs cause you offence, my existence as a Scot, as an independence-seeking Scot, causes offence to Uber unionists. What does that mean? I should jog on and go somewhere else? Don't think so. So let's have it out in the ballot box, and let's do it fairly as per the prescribed rules.
Well, sticking on the legal theme, Sarah, and just going off slightly on a different tangent, because it goes back to what I said about the Chagos Islands and Britain's, England, Britain, whatever you want to call it. Not great love affair with what's right and what's legal. Despite them saying, play about, cricket, not cricket, old boy, and all this stuff. Julia Assange this week, Priti Patel, among all the other things. We can come on to Rwanda later. But has approved that this man, who's a journalist, is going to face 17 charges, which means he'll be, I don't even know if it's a death penalty in the US, you just don't know, but he's certainly spend the rest of his life in jail. It shames us. And what shames me more, I think, is that every other journalist in the United Kingdom remains silent while this tragedy is unfolding and Julian Assange is on his way to America, unless the courts can save him.
Well, where do you start with this? You know, where do you begin to unpick the Gordian knot of horrors that are concentrated in this in the Assange case? Really, you know, Priti Patel is not interested in law, and she is a wonderful example of the British establishment at work. I mean, just there you go. It's more and more you're looking at it and going, people, how could this happen? How could this happen? And I want to say, take a look at your history, and let me correct myself. I talked about English history. Let's call it British establishment history. So after the UK, it became the British establishment. And my God, we've had enough of our own traitors and sellouts that have become part of the British establishment and still damn well are, and they should be ashamed of themselves. And one of the pillars of Scottish democracy was what's called the Fourth Estate. Something, give yourself a treat sometime. Go back and do some research into the way that pamphleteering and reporting and town hall meetings went on in Scotland, and how absolutely politically active and educated and literate, by the way, the Scottish population was, from being really right from about the 14th century. It's a huge Scottish tradition. And what have our media become? What have they done? If they had not repeated the insipid, disgusting narrative, oh, Julian Assange was smelly. Honestly, it came down to that right from the start. Oh, he was involved in sex with it was lurid sexting, which turns out to have been absolute rubbish. And all the papers talked about was his personality. And I remember the Guardian had a piece about how he was dirty and smelly when he was in the Ecuadorian embassy, and his cat and this, that, and the other. All the while, the basic principle of the right to tell the truth, the right of journalists to report, to hold corrupt power to account, was at stake all the time. We get wee bits and pieces now. I mean, even Amnesty was quiet until recently. So now we're getting tiny wee bits and pieces in this paper or that. The entire media should have been up in arms. And if it wasn't, it tells us something very important, which I think needs to be part of our independence campaign this time. Really, we need a context. It tells us that we no longer have a fourth estate. We no longer have a means by which people can be informed. And as Phil said, they can have opinions from either side that, as long as they are well worked out, supported, researched, they should be heard. And that doesn't, we've not heard the truth about Assange through the media. We've not heard the truth about the situation in the Donbass. We've not heard the truth about what NATO has been up to, the other side of that. We didn't hear both sides of, do we want a vaccine? Is it, just the discussion, an intelligence discussion becomes, nutty to say that no, you need to hear both sides. And what we have is a propaganda machine, and it's absolutely clear. There is a narrative, and the weird thing is, the narrative is the same around the world. You can look at what's happening in different countries and what the media is reporting there, and oh my goodness, it's exactly the same line. Assange stands for the last hope of any kind of democracy, any kind of participatory democracy or input by the people, any kind of justice in the world, because without a free and fair press, media, you have no way of holding power to account. So, he stands for all of us.
Now, on that topic of when you say the rest of the world, it's the rest of the globalist Western type world, Sarah. Would be fair to say that it seems that the world's splitting into two factions: the American, Anglo, EU, NATO world, and the rest of the world. Which again, the people in not just in Scotland but in the EU and the US are not getting told that either. The rest of the world, they're out of here.
Yeah.
And one of those things, you saw this video this week, which is now Techie's going to play for us, about the German journalist, the young girl who 6 months ago went to Donbass, Sarah, to cover, as a journalist, the conflict over there. As an independent, honest journalist. And this is what happened to her.
My name is Alina Lipp. I'm an independent German journalist living in Donetsk. I'm living here for half a year now, telling Germans what is going on in the Donbass region and in Ukraine. And for that, the German authorities now started to persecute me. First they deleted my material in the internet. Then they blocked my bank account, blocked the bank account of my father. And yesterday I got this letter from German authorities that they opened now a criminal case against me. So these are the documents, and for Germans the support of the special operation of Russia in Ukraine is already a criminal act, for which you can obviously get 3 years in prison.
There you go.
Alina Lipp.
Yeah, I mean, just her father, who's not even a journalist, sitting back in Germany, and
bank account.
His bank account gets frozen as well, and she gets told she's going to jail for 3 years for telling the truth, and as far as they're concerned, a narrative that doesn't suit them. They don't want the public knowing the truth of what's going on.
Yeah, this can't be emphasised enough. Sarah's right. This is deadly serious, and the jailing of Assange is effectively a death penalty. Sending him to America is effectively a death penalty. Now, WikiLeaks has been magnificent as truth speakers, and they took on the USA. So the split that we have between this the West, led by or dictated to by the USA, and the rest, China and Russia and etc. When you take on the USA and you take on the establishment, you suffer the consequences. But we should stand up, because these are our countries that are doing this. When you look at freedom of speech and you look at Julian Assange and Alina Lipp and Juan Sin Miedo, the government's jailing these people now, or attempting to jail them. And with Craig Murray, Alex Salmond imprisoned or attempted to be imprisoned for speaking the truth or on false trumped up charges, the truth has to out. The New York Times started to break the qualified story about what's happening in the Donbass a few weeks ago, and slowly it's been drip fed, because they can't continue to tell the lies they have been telling, that the Ukrainians are gloriously winning the right charges and the Russians are idiots. The truth will eventually out. You can't hide the fact that the Russians have already won, were always going to win, and had substantial justification for doing what they did. Like it or lump it, they had. You don't build 24 or 26 biolabs on the border and fill them with NATO experts. The list goes on, but the truth is important, and you've got some people speaking out. The Dutch are now, the Dutch are talking, saying it like it is, and I'm not a big fan of Dutch PM Mark Rutte, who admits it's a proxy war of America against Russia, but supports it nonetheless. Was the Mexican president, or is it Obrador? Obrador, I think, calls it is, but won't join in with supply weapons or imposition of sanctions. List the truth speakers. Julian Assange, falsely accused of sexual offences, just as Sarah said, jailed and being slowly tortured to death. Not a word from SNP, to their shame, to their absolute shame. Alex Salmond, falsely accused of sexual offences, acquitted on all charges, if imprisoned, effectively a death sentence given his health issues. Craig Murray, also falsely accused of sexual offences by the British government for speaking the truth when he spoke up courageously on extradition, on and what he did in that, and put his whole job on the line, his whole career on the line, on rendition, special rendition. Then there's Scott Ritter, ex-UN weapons inspector for Iraq, ex-Marine Corps intelligence officer and commentator, also charged with sexual misconduct in a sting operation. Alina Lipp, on the ground Ukraine, just as we've seen, telling Germany the truth as an independent journalist, bank accounts frozen, father's bank accounts frozen, and threatened with 3 years imprisonment. And then Juan Sun Miedo, also same thing, telling the truth about Ukraine, and it looks like he'll be jailed for 3 years. Now, we need to support the people that are telling the truth, and that means spreading the word about other truth speakers, the Duran, Alex Mercouris and Alex Christoforou, the Grey Zone, Max Blumenthal and Aaron May, Douglas McGregor, the ex-US Army Colonel who's speaking the truth, Scott Ritter, Judge Freedom, Judging Freedom, Judge Napolitano. So no, we need to do more about this, and we need
And
to
they're trying to deplatform them all. I mean,
well, and you.
I know,
and us.
I know.
What people don't understand is Twitter, the algorithms are running the show. The algorithms are put in place quite deliberately to sanction anyone who stands up against the establishment. And the great hope that was and still is social media and the internet, because the truth is out there. Unlike mainstream television and mainstream media, MSN's in decline for very good reason. People are not stupid. The reason people like Joe Rogan are successful with podcasting is because he doesn't treat his audience like idiots. He's not drip feeding them nonsense and the same tired story. People are not stupid. If you give them, you keep them occupied. It's like bread and circuses, keep them occupied with nonsense, then yeah, fair enough. But there comes a point, and we're getting to that. We've gotten there in Scotland, but we have been sidetracked, and we have our movement has been undermined substantially by the establishment, and this is why I'm uncomfortable that we're moving forward in a non-clear matter without strong leadership, and I'm not comfortable with the deplatforming, the silencing of critics, the silencing of people who would challenge the establishment. The system that's in place just now is set up to retain the status quo. And I don't know about you, but they were not my favourite band.
On that question of deplatforming and censorship, I mean, I know that I think we should reiterate it here again, because when you don't play the NATO game and speak up for Putin mad, Russia bad, Ukraine wonderful, NATO great, America great, you're immediately called a Putin apologist and a warmonger. I don't know how many times I've had to say this, write this, and say, I oppose all wars. I was demonstrating against the Vietnam War when I was a teenager. I've been opposed to every single bloody war that's going, and I will continue to be. I condemn, well, I understand there's been justification, but for me, there's no justification for war, Phil, of Russia. I condemn their invasion. I condemn anyone that's dying. There's people dying today that don't need to die. Diplomacy can sort anything out. So let me make that abundantly clear. I take the position of the Yes movement and of the Alaba party just now. I want to see an immediate ceasefire. I want to see a negotiated settlement, and I don't want to see war and death. The only innocents in all of this are the civilians, be they Ukrainian or Russian or whoever. That's the only innocence. There's blood in everyone else's hands. So that said, censorship doesn't help when you're not allowed to speak out, and we've got it to a lesson. So I've got the two things. One, I'm looking at both sides of the argument in Russia and Ukraine, and coming up with and trying to inform people. But it's very difficult because, as I pointed out, I'm getting squeezed, I'm getting shadow blocked and banned, I'm getting attacks on my website, all sorts of stuff. And I noticed that one person in America, they deplatformed him from PayPal, so he can't get his money in, it's ridiculous. But the other one in Scotland we're getting done for, and throughout UK as well, is on the gender issue, Sarah. That I turned around, I made for them the biggest sin. I one time said, trans women are not women.
Duh.
Yeah, I know, but God, what followed wasn't pleasant. It wasn't nice, but it's true. And for speaking the truth, I'm throttled. I'm kicked off. I'm blocked from sites. I'm blocked from pages all over the joint. And we're getting it just now. They're doing this committee at Holyrood just now. And the part they're talking this week was on trans women in sport. So let's make that clear. Trans women are men who have decided to become women. Fine, if you want to do that, do it. But they shouldn't be allowed in sport. So the Olympic medalist, one of Britain's most famous swimmers, a champion of women's sport in general, Sharon Davis arrives, and they say, yeah, we don't want you in here. We don't want your evidence. We only want evidence from people. And there was another, Gina Davidson, she was also not allowed to give evidence. They're only taking in evidence, Sarah, of those who agree with them. It's not right. You need to unmute yourself again. You've muted up again.
Muted back up, right. This is another one where it's, where do you start? And we've got so far down this rabbit hole that we're sitting here having to have a discussion about why women are not allowed to have a say on what affects women. We're having this discussion. Did I get something slipped into a drink one day and wind up in Wonderland and I can't get out because it's insane. And it's and if people get behind it, when you convince people, I've said this before, but if you convince people when they look outside and the sun is shining, no, hen, it's midnight, and they believe you, they are not right in the head anymore. Right? You stop being sane. And you have to point out to people, look, you can identify as a woman. That's fine. I'm happy to accept a human being in whatever way they choose to identify, and make sure they have all the rights that a human being should have.
Yep.
But I'm sorry, you're built genetically in a different way to me that gives you an advantage every time. So what happens is, because you feel like a woman, you identify as a woman, and you've decided, we all have to say that you are a woman. Well, then what happens is we now have male sports and male-dominated sports. Talk genetically. Let's call it genetically, biologically. You are now competing as a woman against women who have a completely biological structure to you and can't fairly compete. So we're going to discuss this. We're actually going to have evidence on this. Excuse me? You don't need evidence on this. You need to have a look at what's fair and what's obvious and just say, look, we have to have a category. Maybe what they need to do is create a category for people who are genetically and biologically not male, so that women can continue to compete. I don't know, but we've got to that point where if we accept it, we're all going to be a bit weird.
This is crazy.
It's
crazy.
Well, can I just, before you start, just so you know, although they deleted it very quickly, but they were admitting it, a eunuch is now a gender.
What?
A eunuch is a gender nowadays.
Oh, sling it. I mean, the SNP have pulled a typical UK government trick here by excluding actual experts who know what they're talking about and that do not comply with the Scottish Government predetermined findings. Because that's what's happened here. They have predetermined findings here. They were going to go ahead with this come hell or high water, and it's a disgrace. Sharon Davis and is it Mariah Mauchi or Mauki? I can't remember. Offered to testify, and they were rejected. And instead, 2 male officers of a sports organisation, funny enough, funded or part funded by the Scottish Government, testify that the bill would have, and I'm quoting here, would have no significant impact on women's sport. That's a lie. You're liars. Why aren't they being called out? They're not getting called out. It's a predetermined investigation, and I said it was blatant corruption. So what we're going to do to straighten it up? Disgrace.
But they did that, Phil, surely in 2021 when we had the Holyrood election, which it was, GRA reform wasn't mentioned. As soon as the election was over, Nicola Sturgeon turned around and said, well, the Scottish people have endorsed this, because in page 36, subparagraph 6, 2 lines were written.
Generic,
and she said this was that they all backed it. You didn't mention it during the election, but it's in the manifesto. You
It
know,
wasn't really. No, it wasn't really. It's more of the lies. It's like it's the joke with Rwanda, in the European Court of Human Rights. They're getting they're being. If you scrutinise it, you will catch these people out. If we hold them to account, and that's why it's so important to have a fourth estate that has melted away. It's been bought out. It's been bought out by the corporations, and you look at the people that own these the printed it's in decline. It should be in decline. The TV stations, Murdoch owns the Times, the Sunday Times, it goes on and on. It's like in the hands of 6 billion or 8 billionaires, the Barclay brothers, Viscount Rothermere, most of whom who live abroad. No, we have no one to fight and stand up for us, and we've already pointed that out. It's infuriating. What do we do about it? We've got to do something. We can't allow it to continue.
yeah. Well, they're doing the Tories, Sarah, are planning to get rid of the European Convention on Human Rights. They don't like it. The fact that the British wrote it under Winston Churchill, Boris
Brilliant.
Johnson, hero, but we're getting rid of it because it doesn't suit us, so we'll get it to. The Brexit withdrawal agreement, which the British government negotiated and now don't like, well, we're going to get rid of it. And the protocol which you insisted upon, the Northern Ireland, you insisted upon, it was your idea, you negotiated it, and we don't like it anymore, so get rid of it. So that's what worries me, going back to, in the loop back to legal and law. It's when it suits the British government, just as it suits the Scottish government on GRA reform, when it suits these governments in the UK, both of them, when there's a law they don't like, they just ignore it. They just bypass it, get rid of it, change it. We have a huge problem. You need to unmute again.
Yeah. Look, it comes right back to what I was saying earlier on. They're living. I'm sorry. This is going to sound awful, but these guys go to public schools where they're taught about the glories of the British Empire, and they're part of the continuing heritage of the British Empire. Rah rah, blah blah. Last night at the proms, wave your flags, what have you. They have not woken up to what the rest of the world sees when it looks at the history of the British Empire. They have not woken up to the fact that for the vast majority of people under British colonial rule, they lived in hell.
Yeah.
And they have never taken a look at themselves in the mirror. They always made it up as they went along. Mm-hmm. This is British establishment logic, right? We are the great bastion of democracy and freedom and human rights. Look at our fantastic record, but don't show us that bit. We hold the torch for the entire world. And because that's who we are, we will write the laws, and anything we write is going to be great and good and and wonderful. And who are you to argue with us? They're still thinking from the mentality that was there when there was nobody to stand up to this obnoxious, lethal, inhuman, arrogant tyrant that marched with its big boots across the world and still sees itself as absolutely wonderful. And please don't bother me with the history of all of our massacres and genocides and ecocides and all the rest of it that we're responsible for. No, it's land of hope and glory. And that's why we get to do this. And they are still thinking like that. And I tell you, there is an opening here beginning, because while there's a problem that we're in there with this the new American empire, and so in there with the NATO and all the rest of it, nonetheless there's a lot of the rest of the world still out there.
Yep.
And that rest of the world does not look kindly on this kind of thinking that we made the laws, we'll make them and unmake them and do what we want, and you can't stop us thinking. Mm-hmm. They do not take well to that. So it's coming close, I think, to the point which somebody, and I'm hoping it'll be Scotland, takes this shower to the International Court and stands them up and says they break every treaty that they enter into, every single one. They rewrite it, they redescribe it, they reinterpret it so that it fits what their establishment interests want it to say. And it's time they were held to account. And I've got a feeling that the rest of the world is getting pretty ready to stand up and say, aye, time this shower was held to account. So, that's my That's my rant over.
Yeah, well, playing devil's advocate, and you're just recently from there, Phil, in India. I mean, they could argue with their empire. I mean, they gave the Indians cricket and railways and law. I mean, they were so generous.
Yeah, and stole 54 trillion and speak to Sashi Tharoor about this. We all, I mean, anybody who's paying attention knows that it was rape and pillage and theft. The GDP of India in 1700 was 28% of the world GDP, 23% in 1800. When the Brits left, it was in single figures. So, yeah, no, thank you. It's not true. It's more lies. But no, this one's. There's a really good article by John Coleraine in RTE on this one, and it goes into detail. Truss says Britain's amending the Northern Ireland agreement, and Europe's saying it's in breach of its undertakings under international law. And obviously, I can't pronounce his name, but it looks like Sefcovic. On the EU Commission confirmed they will restart infringement proceedings, which have been on hold since September 2021. So bring it on. You're getting all this.
So you know as well as I do. A call's going to come from America very soon, if it hasn't already happened, and they're going to be told, just behave yourself. You're not going to do this. America will tug their chain.
Yeah, and this is the frightening thing here is that in spite of all this UN bluster, EU bluster, sanctions, and these institutions that are supposed to be set up to protect human rights and protect humanity and stand for the justice, and something Sarah touched on earlier, I'm a big fan of the pamphleteers, Thomas Paine being a particular hero of mine, and it's a British problem, and it was a British institution, the rights of man, the age of reason, and what he did during the French Revolution and the American Revolution as a pamphleteer, than some of the books he's written. This is a tradition that has been betrayed. The Fourth Estate is no longer something we can be proud of. It's a tool, it's a puppet, and we have to find a different ways of standing up to oppression. And here's the news, guys. We're not the good guys. We have not been the good guys for a very, very long time. It'd be nice if it was all cowboy films and the black hat guys and the white hat guys. It was clear to discern it, but it's not the case. We're not the good guys in the Russian-Ukrainian issue. We're not the good guys in Europe. We haven't been. We're not the good guys in India. And the other thing, who's we? It's the elite. It's the establishment. The British people, as I've said before, our forefathers were peasants a couple of generations ago. We were, up the chimney, down the pit, worked the dark satanic mills, or went over the top in our hundreds of thousands. So don't blame me for any of this crap. I'm up for the fight. I want to settle some scores here. So let's find a way. Let's find a way to take these people to account and sort it all out. Well, outside the now. Come on, square go.
It might yet come to that. Ladies and gentlemen, the clock is beating us as always. It does, and I could go on here for ages with you two. It's really great. But we have. Can I thank you both for participating today, and to our viewers. I hope you've all enjoyed it. And our Sarah is going to finish off the show for us.
Hi, I'm going to do a shameless advert. We're launching the official launch of the Claim of Right campaign under Salvo. Is the 3rd of July, W Hall, Larbert. Tickets are free. You can get them on the salvo.scot website. Thank you.
And we'll run that along the bottom of the show. Techie will take care of that and give it another advert. Send me your check. You know how to make it out. Don't cross. Made to cash. Right. Ladies, gentlemen, thank you very much. Viewers, and may you and yours stay.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism.